Good evening. I'd like to call to order a regular council meeting on Monday, November 10th, to order at 6 p.m. I'm Mayor McNeil Smith. Councillor colleagues in the room to my far left, Councillor Novick, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Runtoul. To my far right, Councillor Duncan, and Councillor Garnett. Good evening to members of staff, to our presenters this evening, and to members of the public, either in the chamber or to those who may be watching the live webcast or a recording of the meeting at a later date. We want to respectfully acknowledge that we're holding our meeting in the territory of the Saanich nations, the Saanich people, the Sayote Nation, the Sartlip Nation, the Pakwachin Nation, the Sakem Nation, and the Malahat Nation. In turning to approval of the agenda, we have one change since the agenda was made public last Thursday. Councillor O'Keefe has Councillor Duncan has requested raising an item of correspondence under 15.9, and we will move that from 15.9 to 14A. That's the only change. We have no additions. I'd seek a movers for their agenda. Councillor Duck and Councillor Duncan. Any discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? None opposed, that carries. And we're now turning to public participation, where we provide members of the public an opportunity to address council for up to 4 minutes. So I'll call for a first time. Does anyone wish to address council this evening? We don't have anyone online. I'll call for a second time in the chamber. Anyone wishing to address council? Not seeing any. I'll close public participation and we'll turn to our presentation this evening. Under 4D1, we have the Quarter Policing Report and want to welcome Staff Sergeant Wayne Conley from our RCMP detachment. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor and members of council. Good to be back. There we go. Good to be back and to be able to provide an update on policing services this evening. And then as a second item, I have a proposal regarding a major crime disclosure clerk, which I'd like to speak to as well. And I believe that council was provided with a previous report with regards to that. So in 2025, the detachment has experienced a significant turnover with municipal employee administration staff. We have lost 5 employees that left their positions this year, which is 1/2 of our administrative staff. But there's a variety of reasons that were involved. Some retirement, relocating for new opportunities, and so these employee departures have, as would be expected, disrupted our operations, and considerable time and effort to train and hire replacement staff is an ongoing process. We're making good progress on that, but we still have a little ways to go. On the officer side of the detachment, there have been 3 officer departures in 2025. 2 officers left the RCMP, left our detachment and the RCMP, and joined other police agencies. A 3rd officer proceeded on a transfer to another detachment. Thus far, 2 incoming officers have arrived as replacements, and another officer is expected to arrive in February 2026. We have 1 vacancy that remains unfilled and 4 other members that are on extended either medical leave or parental leave. I'm happy to finally be able to report that effective October 1st of this year, a full-time traffic officer has been internally staffed. This officer will be carrying out traffic enforcement duties in both Sydney and North Saanich, and the enforcement priorities will include driving while under the influence of alcohol or drug, speeding, distracted driving, and other Motor Vehicle Act offenses. So I know that's been a long time coming, but we've finally arrived at that point. There are a few changes that will enhance, so I just wanted to speak to equipment and vehicles for a moment. There are a few changes that will enhance the response and capabilities of frontline officers. I don't know if anybody has noticed, but with the arrival of a new F-150 EV truck. The detachment will participate in a national pilot to assess the suitability and functionality of EV vehicles for 24-hour frontline policing. And I extend thanks to the town of Sydney for having put in the charging stations. That has been important for that to happen. I also wanted to mention that the vehicle that we have, that part of this pilot, has been provided at no cost to the municipalities. Sydney and North Saanich are not paying for this vehicle. How long we will have it, I don't know, but I expect that it'll be a couple of years, maybe longer. And so we'll see what happens as that time arrives. In August 2025, detachment members were trained and equipped with body-worn cameras. The impacts of evidence disclosure are resulting in delays. We're early in it. It's just 3 months that we've been involved, but we're already seeing a result of some delays in the process. So this is going to be a work in progress for some time before all the kinks are worked out of it, I'm sure. There's been a fair bit of media. Both the West Shore, I think, had a media article a couple of weeks ago about impacts to policing on that, and we saw the one that was in the paper about Crown Council and impacts to them. A new model of conducted energy weapon, or tasers, and an extended long-range impact weapon equipment are new additions to the detachment equipment. They provide further non-lethal use of force options for officers trained in the use of this equipment. This is a big enhancement to our capabilities. I wanted to mention a little bit of an update on the crime summary. The quarterly report was forwarded previously a couple of weeks ago. So the most recent crime summary report for the period ending September 30th indicates some fluctuation in crime levels, increases in serious crime categories for robbery and sex assault offenses, doubled from what was statistics from the previous year. Other crime categories with significant increases included domestic violence, uttering threats, and cause disturbance categories. On the good news side, we are seeing a decline in almost all property crime categories in 2025. Overall, this is reflecting a decrease of 12% in property crime levels. So that's good to see that trend is happening. So perhaps at this point, I can just stop for a moment. I'd like to proceed with my comments about the major crime disclosure clerk, if that's okay, and then take questions after that, unless there would be some questions that you would like me to stop at this point.
Well, thanks, Staff Sergeant Conley. We have received a report from staff regarding that position, and we will be speaking to that later on the agenda. So we certainly welcome listening to you on that. But I think just having provided the policing report, perhaps I'll turn to colleagues if there are any questions on the policing report, and then I'll certainly come back to you for that opportunity. I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe first, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you for the report, Staff Sergeant Conley. You mentioned, I had a question about the significant decrease in the number of impaired drivers. And you also, in your comments, you mentioned that the position, I guess, was vacant, a traffic officer, for some time, and it's filled now. So I wondered whether is the 58% decrease in number of impaired drivers because we didn't have somebody out there checking people or doing as many roadblocks, or did we allocate pretty much the same resources, and that there has indeed been that decline despite I'm just trying to compare apples and apples sort of thing.
You bet. I think from my perspective, the change or the decline that you're seeing is impaired driving is pretty much a proactive policing piece. Like it's out doing the road checks and all of that. And what we experienced over the past 2 years is a major turnover in experienced officers who were highly engaged in traffic enforcement. And we've had a new group of young officers, several young officers over the last year. And it takes some time for them to develop that same experience. And we're on the upswing, and with the new traffic position, I expect that there will be some mentorship that goes on along with that experienced traffic officer that we now have, and we'll see those, we'll see more normalizing of those statistics. Okay. I don't think that, to answer your question a little more clearly, I don't think it has anything to do with that there's less of that sort of offenses happening. It's more to do with the enforcement.
Okay, that's, yeah, good. That's good to know. Yeah, thank you for that. And just one other question I had was related to the Assistance to Shelter Act. So winter's coming, and I know that under the legislation, so police are required to identify persons at risk of suffering physical harm because of extreme cold weather conditions and offer them assistance to get to a shelter. So we don't have one in Sydney. I'm wondering what will be our local police approach to unhoused persons and transporting them to shelter if they request that.
So last year, our community policing officer was our primary lead on the engagement with the unhoused people during extreme weather events. And part of the engagement was to make contact with those that were in the community that were unhoused, to be able to assess their situations and to offer assistance if they needed that. I think what we discovered last year is that very few, in fact, I can only think of one or possibly two occasions where they actually asked for assistance to be transported somewhere for shelter. And in those instances, our officers are aware of the different facilities that are in the CRD, and they would then, through discussion with that person, try to figure out what they could do to assist that person, and then assist them to get there.
So do you normally like know ahead of time if there's space at a shelter? Or like one of the things we heard from people is concern about, you know, getting transported downtown to a shelter only to find that a lot of them are full.
I think we'd have to be proactive and phone around. I know if you go on to the BC housing site, that you can determine what facilities are actually providing that availability. But I think we'd probably have to make some phone calls and do assistance that way. In some cases, we may, the person may just want like a BC Transit ticket or something, and we were providing those as well. And you know, if it's during bus hours and it's not in the middle of the night, then we would provide that assistance if that's what they were looking for.
Right, okay, that's all, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Novick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Staff Sergeant Conley, for your report. It's encouraging in some areas and maybe not so much in others. And that's one of the ones I want to ask a few questions about, the fraud issues. It shows that there's a bit of an increase, maybe 20%. And I guess my concern is that, do you have any statistics or any kind of a sense of how many of these types of crimes go unreported due to embarrassment, shame, whatever? People don't want their friends or neighbors to know that they've been a victim of this type of crime.
Well, I think a lot of these crimes do go unreported to police. The reason I say that is because in discussions, previous discussions that we've had with banking representatives, they have indicated high numbers of people that they've worked with to try and assist them, which is like much higher numbers than what we see. So there's a distinct difference between the number of people that have come to the attention of the banks as they're, you know, trying to do something, and the bank is trying to help them recognize that they are being taken advantage of or scammed by someone. And so a lot of times those people never do contact the police. So we're not really seeing a true picture from the policing statistics of what is actually happening in the community. We are showing that in 2025 we had a decline, I think what was it, of well, we had 56 reported frauds so far this year compared to 74 last year. So we're seeing a decline in the number of scam offenses that have been reported to us. However, the amount of loss actually increased, even though there were less offenses. And it has a lot to do with what type of scams are taking place at any given time, because we have all seen how those scams just keep changing all the time, right? But some of the ones that have happened most recently, like the investment scam, is one in which the losses are significantly higher.
Thank you for that. Are these crimes or these incidents investigated either at a local level or at a regional level?
At a local level.
So do we have somebody within our detachment that specializes in these types of economic or computer-based frauds?
We don't have a subject matter expert. We have I have Jessica here, who is with our major crimes department at our detachment, and they have a couple of larger fraud investigations that unit is working with. So if it becomes a fairly complex investigation, then we reach to our major crime unit to take that on, just because of how complex it has become. But I will be frank that a lot of these investigations, there is not a high success rate with them because they're so difficult. They're from out of the country. It's just complicated to trace a lot of the investigatively to gather the evidence.
Do you have a sense of where this is going? Is there sort of do you feel that this type of crime is on the increase? Is it something that we have to allocate additional resources for, especially in a community where we have a large, I would say, target market of retired folks who are the target of a lot of these fraud artists?
I would describe it as an evolving crime. So fraud scams have been on the rise. As I was mentioning a few minutes ago, we're seeing some decline in property crime, and what we're seeing is a little bit of a decline kind of happening there, but we're seeing more of the economic type crimes, the fraud scam. I don't think it's going away anytime soon. It seems to be the thing of the day, the age that we have with technology. And yeah, I know that nationally there are some strategies that the RCMP are applying to sort of focus on this at a major scale level, but every community is facing more of this than 10 years ago.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you,
You're welcome.
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Conley, and thanks for your report as usual. Very informative. Stepping outside of the report, I'm just curious. Seeing in the last few months that Langford West Shore RCMP did sort of a campaign on bicycle enforcement and education. Is that something we might be considering approaching here in the town of Sydney?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I've had some discussions with our new traffic officer, and I have asked him to pay attention to some of those issues with cyclists, pedestrians as well, and also with the e-scooter thing that we've had. We had a fairly serious e-scooter accident, I don't know, 3 weeks ago, I guess it would be. And fortunately, the young person involved didn't get as badly hurt as they could have been in that incident. So yeah, these are, I'm just really happy that we've been able to get this traffic position off the ground, and to get it staffed, I mean, and to be able to have some focus, because when we are focused on it, we actually have a lot better results from that overall in the community. So I expect to see some focus on those things as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you. And drawing on your experience, it occurred to me that with the electric bicycles, they've developed over time, and now there are some of them that can go 50 kilometers an hour. I have 2 young 13 to 14-year-olds in my neighborhood who have the electric dirt bikes that go up to 50 kilometers an hour. And I'm wondering, are we at the point, in your professional opinion, where the province needs to consider licensing some of these modes of transportation?
Ooh, I don't feel well equipped to answer that question.
That's a tough one.
But yeah, I mean, we're seeing all kinds of changes with
Yeah.
modes of transportation, and you're right. Like, we're seeing the e-bikes. I've seen the scooters that I live in Central Saanich, but I've seen them like booking it down the
Yeah.
road, to use that term. They're just flying, and so the concern, of course, is if you bail or if you run into something, the injuries are obviously going to be much more catastrophic. So licensing, I know that Sydney is part of the e-scooter pilot program. I don't really have a good read to tell you about what the province might be looking at in terms of changes there.
Okay. No,
We haven't seen fortunately, we haven't seen, like, Motor Vehicle Act collision increases as a result of e-bikes, but I get concerned as I'm about the community a bit, seeing like the number of, stop signs that are blown through, or people riding bikes with no helmets. Those are all things that are required under the Motor Vehicle Act, and I'd like to see us get a higher compliance rate in those areas.
Great. Yeah, I agree with that totally. And my last question, again, drawing on your experience, we're currently conducting a survey about the potential for reducing our speeds in local roads from 50 to 30 kilometers an hour. And I wonder if you could provide, from your vast years of doing this job, if you could comment on the merits of it, or if you think there are any.
Well, I think a lot of communities are looking at that and have made changes in that direction. Statistically, it might not be, or it might be difficult to, apply the justification of that just based on, accident statistics or even speed statistics. But it's hard to argue that if people are driving slower on residential streets, that wouldn't be safer. And it only takes like 1 or 2 accidents, involving a child that runs out onto the road. I live on a residential street that has many children, and everybody knows Wayne's truck, and I come down that road, and my immediate thing as soon as I turn onto my street is, like, I don't go more than like 20 kilometers down my street, because there are kids it's a dead-end street, so they're running out on the road all the time. And so that's the thing that I think is a factor to consider. If these are residential streets that we're talking about, how do you not sort of support something that would enhance the safety, even if only part of that is compliance? I think you have to also understand that enforcement is unrealistic, right, in terms of that piece. But if you're getting some compliance from people, they're just going to go a bit slower because the speed limit is reduced. then I don't know. Personally, I think that's not a bad thing.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. Just a note on your question, and thank you for asking it, and the response, Staff Sergeant, with regards to e-bikes and the pilot. The pilot, when council approved Sydney joining, was over a year ago, and we understand it's a 3-year pilot. What we're seeing is such a rapid rise, such a rapid increase in those scooters and e-bikes. It would be nice if the province, started to consider, the actions they might take instead of waiting for another couple of years, particularly since there was a pilot for 2 or 3 years in both Metrovan and Kelowna. But thanks for raising it.
There are some interesting laws associated with the e-scooter vehicles, right? In terms of they're a bit different than like a motor or a bicycle. They're different than that, right? So.
I'll turn to Councillor Duncan next, please.
Yeah, thank you. I guess I just, following on Councillor Novak's comments about the scam crimes, and just knowing that human nature is human nature, they'll never go away. The issue, when I look at this, is less about whether they're overall going up or down, because I expect them to keep going up, or roughly go up and down forever. Is where they're hitting now, and I can see that where they go down is because they've kind of saturated the marks in that market, right? Like people get used to being like, oh wait, this one was a scam. It's been in the newspapers. The police have put out enough notices. People realize if I get a message about this, it's going to be a scam. So now when they say it's claimed to be business or it's an investment in a loan scam, it feels like this is because there's that lag time until the police start having notices go out in the newspapers saying this is where people are getting taken, if it's this, if they're using this terminology, and they just keep moving it around. And, once they've saturated the marks in that market, they'll go on to the next one. And so I'm just wondering, I could predict that by looking at the financial news and everyone predicting a bubble, that a lot of people are nervously looking for places to park their investments, and this would be a good place to go. So I'm wondering if the police do any kind of predictive, like you have the CEPTED for kind of engineering environments to stop certain types of property crimes. Is there for, this kind of fraud crime, indicators that people might look at to start putting out notices about broader trends that might influence where the next scam comes from?
Well, over the last couple of years, we have tried to be engaged with the community in terms of getting awareness information out there. And that, I think that is a valuable thing to continue with that. I would admit that we've been a little bit lax in that lately just because of other demands and pressures, but I see value in us continuing to try to educate the community more on those things. We actually had a sort of a fraud scam document that we had that was sort of identifying certain things that would help flag people to recognize this is a scam. It's so interesting, like for most of us that work in policing, we know like it's a scam immediately. But it's hard to understand, even for us to understand, how come that isn't recognized by members in the community. Yeah. But I think you may have heard me say this before, I think that the way forward is for all of us that do have a good understanding of what constitutes a scam is to promote that in all of our circles where we can. So with our families, with our grandmothers and seniors that are associated with us and that we're connected to, and I've done this within my family, and I think there's value in it, but yes, your comments are well taken that we need to continue to sort of promote the awareness as best we can. At the higher levels of the RCMP, I think there's all kinds of things that are in place. There's the anti-fraud center that is sort of a national center for that. They do a lot of work, but it's just hard to reach people, and it seems like the very people that we don't reach are the ones that seem to fall victim to this sort of thing. So I wish I had a magic wand for this one.
Yeah, how do I gotta get to those people before the scammer does and warn them what it looks like? It feels, because it's a technology-based thing, people who are older are doubly likely to fall for it because it takes so much work to keep up with the rapidly changing technology landscape, right? That it's just so much harder. But I guess then my next question is, I guess looking at you know, the idea of reporting versus enforcement, the criminal code offenses that did go up, you mentioned, and this is the ones, domestic violence and robbery and sex offense, which in terms of absolute numbers are still low in terms of like incidents per thousand, but the rate has doubled. Is this is those where a charge was pressed versus, or actual total numbers reported?
Not necessarily a charge laid.
No.
Like what I was noticing is, if I can find the page, like we had 3 robberies in, so robbery is not a common offense to happen in Sydney, but to have 3 this year is like a little bit surprising. I think the most recent one involved a firearm that was presented to someone, and over a fairly low-level other offense that had happened, a theft or something. The so I got to find the page here. The one that to answer your question about, these are just reported offenses. They don't speak to the number of charges that were laid with respect to these. So we had double the number of sex offenses reported in this year, right? Still didn't get to the right page.
Yeah.
Yeah, so sex offenses
10.
were double from what we had last year. But I will say that that's not stranger
No.
type sex offenses.
And I would say same. It's kind of the same as with domestic violence, and in some cases uttering threats. And so I guess what I was is asking whether these are charges pressed versus reports is simply that, are people simply becoming more comfortable reporting interpersonal crimes that, like fraud, people used to be far more afraid to report these things, and people feel more comfortable reporting. So it's not necessarily that overall this crime category is increasing, but rather that people are feeling comfortable reporting it when they didn't used to. These are things that used to be hidden.
Yeah, that's quite possible.
And we
I
can't
think
tell from this.
I think I recently read something that was interesting to me about the number of sex offenses that are actually reported to police, and that number was astonishingly low. So without looking at each one of these individual cases, I can't really speak more about but I do know they're not stranger type sex offenses.
All right, thank you very much.
I wanted to mention something about the fraud thing. I think I recently read an article, as I try to stay up on some of the stuff, about people that actually had someone come to their residence and picked up, and I can't remember where that happened, but I think it was somewhere out west here. But it's just, again, if somebody's going to come and pick up your, like, that's a pretty big red flag, right? Like, it just doesn't.
Are you speaking of the child that was picked up from somebody's house in the West Coast community?
No,
At
this
the
was
other
to
side?
do with like sorry, I skipped back to fraud. So it was to do with the fraud thing where they'd come to the house, and actually, I can't remember what they were picking up, but so all kinds of flavors on the fraud side of the house. Sorry, I did a backtrack on you there. Sorry about that.
No, thank you, Councillor Duncan. Not seeing other discussion, thank you again, Staff Sergeant Conley, for your presentation, your update, and for taking our questions. And please extend our appreciation to all members of our thanks for the professional policing services that keeps our community safe. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we do have later in the agenda, and we appreciate you perhaps not being available to stay till that time, a report on the RCMP Administrative Staff Edition. We're more than happy to have you speak to that now, and we'll give consideration to it when we come to it.
That would be much appreciated. I have Jessica here in case there were questions, because she works in this disclosure world. And so again, it depends on what you want to do. I probably have about 5 minutes that I would like to share as you look at that proposal that we have, and then you can decide whether we need to stay or questions now.
Very good.
So I guess I would comment that our major crime section currently, just as a reminder, consists of 3 officers whose primary mandate is to investigate the most serious or complex crime incidents being handled by the detachment. There are provincial policing standards which require these investigations to establish a primary investigator, a file coordinator, and a team commander as management structure for these investigations. That's the way they're organized. An affiant or a search warrant writer is almost always another critical component of these investigations. So I thought it would be helpful to share an understanding of the current evidence collection process, which has increased in complexity in recent years as a result of expanding technology. Almost all serious crime investigations involve hundreds of tasks that are identified, they are assigned, they result in evidence that needs to be collected, and detailed documentation into an electronically structured file. The investigation process is labor intensive, and these are things to consider. The management of a crime scene to preserve evidence, the preparation of initial search warrants to authorize the search for and seizure of evidence, often including forensic evidence, electronic device evidence, and physical evidence, and interviews of all persons who may be able to provide any evidence with respect to a crime. The canvassing of neighbors, businesses, BC Transit, taxi companies, airport, BC Ferries for video evidence is an essential investigation collection step. Judicial authorizations, warrants are required to collect medical records, bank records, seized vehicle searches, phone records, or to seek DNA evidence. The crime lab analysis process provides further investigation steps, as does the crime analysis process for phones and computers. All of the evidence collection steps conducted requires detailed documentation, and the materials gathered can amount to thousands of pages of seized materials. So to understand the disclosure process, I would comment on this. It is impractical and unrealistic for investigating officers to carry out both the serious complex crime investigations and then to additionally compile, organize, format the volumes of evidence into ledger-based electronic disclosure that is mandated by the MOU that has been signed with Crown Counsel. As indicated in the report, the disclosure package prepared will contain hundreds of tasks. The electronic ledger will include hyperlinks. Tasks will have materials vetted and include naming conventions as part of a formatted structure. The disclosure process in itself is very labor intensive. It requires considerable training and is not feasible for officers to manage and meet the disclosure deadlines and obligations for presenting the evidence to Crown Counsel. So in summary, the disclosure workload for major crime investigations is not manageable by the investigating officers. It is unrealistic to train and develop major crime disclosure skills for all 3 of the officers in the major crime unit. The impact of disclosure work is resulting in delays of investigation work, with some project investigations being put on the shelf and not even being undertaken. There is no flexibility involved in disclosure deadlines for in-custody matters, 490 extensions, and you probably don't know what that is, but that's to do with seized property, or in accordance with Jordan rules, which dictate how quickly a person gets to trial. So in summary, the administrative the administration support provided by a major crime disclosure clerk will enable time-sensitive investigation work to be achieved in conduct of major crime investigations. That's my sentiment about why we need this, and we need it badly. And I'm pretty. I'd be pretty blunt to say that we're probably 5 years behind the curve in getting this position. When this MOU came out in 2020, I think that's when we should have been starting to have discussions. But for various reasons and other pressures, you know, things sometimes get delayed until you're at the panic point, and we're at that point where we just cannot function without it. And so that's what I would share with you at this point in time.
Staff Sergeant, we'd ask that you perhaps stay with us, and Council, I'd seek a motion that we move agenda item 13C from where it is in the agenda to now.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor? That motion carries. I'd just briefly like to go to our Director of Finance, Mr. Hissick, if you could provide an introduction to your staff report, and then we'll turn to questions of that council members have, either of yourselves, Staff Sergeant, or staff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The purpose of the report, as outlined, as Staff Sergeant Conley has already spoken to, is to obtain pre-budget approval for the creation of a cost-shared major crime disclosure clerk, a position that would serve the Sydney North Saanich RCMP detachment to meet court-related obligations. A 2020 MOU with the prosecution services of both BC and Canada has significantly increased the administrative burden on RCMP investigators to the point where it cannot be met. A new administrative position will ease some of the burden on the officers and assist with a more efficient prosecution of major crimes. Hiring an admin position rather than another RCMP officer is more cost efficient and allows for specialized training and continuity. This request is being advanced prior to the budget process due to the urgency of having this position in place. While we try to limit the occurrence of pre-budget requests, they are sometimes necessary, and this is one of those instances. This position is cost-shared with the District of North Saanich, with the net budget impact on the town estimated at roughly $47,000, which equates to about 1/3 of 1% tax impact. I'm here for any questions, as is the Staff Sergeant. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. I'll now turn to questions. I'll start with Councillor Garnett and Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. Clearly, this is a cost-sharing position, as you mentioned. Do we have any idea of when, through your communication with North Saanich staff, when they might be considering this? I just haven't seen any agendas in the most recent. So I'm given the time-sensitive nature, is it something that they would be considering fairly soon?
I understand it's next Monday.
Okay. And a follow-up question. In the very unlikely event that for some reason we were to pass the motion, but they didn't, is there a method whereby if we consider it to be of high importance that we could go it alone if we had to?
That has never occurred in my experience with this cost-sharing agreement. If it does, we will, I think, have a decision to make.
Great. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sure. Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Rintoul.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Staff Sergeant Conley. I do support the recommendation that is in the report. I will just ask you, I seem to recollect some discussion during this term around a major crime unit, perhaps integrating police forces here within the CRD. And I don't recollect the status of that, but I know there are integrated teams in other areas of police service in the region. In those instances, when there's an integrated team of that nature, is this a shared position, meaning that resources are not assigned to the detachment per se, but to the integrated team? So I'm just trying to understand where Sydney North Saanich detachment may be a part of integrated homicide investigative team. Does this position exist, and what we're looking at wouldn't be participant to cases of that nature?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And so you're referring to the homicide team that's called VIMQ, Vancouver Island Integrated Homicide Team. So just as a, I'll get to your question, but I just wanted to do a little prelude. So currently, Sydney, North Saanich, and Souk are not signatories to or not part of the MOU for VIMQ, which again is part of the, and it's not from a lack of like pushing for that, because I have been vocal about that for many years, but the province has been unwilling to open up that MOU to allow others to go into it. They're wanting to look at the much bigger model of the whole island going to the Vancouver Island homicide team. I think that's back to, I believe that's back to looking at other options at this point, but I don't know how close they are to presenting a different option. Then to get to your question, Councillor Rintoul, so this major crime disclosure position would be dedicated entirely to our detachment and would not be utilized for, for an integrated team situation. However, just one little however, is that if the homicide team came in to assist our detachment, so we have such a small major crime unit and we needed to have that assistance, which is quite feasible, that disclosure clerk would of course be working with our detachment, our major crime unit, but we'd also have that homicide team maybe helping us as well. So it doesn't mean they're working for them, it just with them in that instance, if that makes it clear.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you see it anything different? Am I missing anything? Okay.
Councillor O'Keefe, please.
Thank you. Thank you for the report, and sounds like a reasonable recommendation to me. I'm just wondering about so we operated without this position for 5 years. So has the amount of cases increased so that it's becoming unmanageable, or that we just kind of didn't realize how much of this stuff was going to have to be done, or a combination of both?
So it's a good question. How have we survived this long?
Yeah.
We haven't done well, I'll be frank. And I could have Jessica speak to it. But we have, as I mentioned before, we have investigations that we haven't touched because we can't get to them. And we have the members, if I can say it this way. So if you think about it from this perspective, do you want your police officers in a major crime unit investigating, or do you want them doing paperwork that an administrative clerk can do? Because that's what's happening. They're spending, as Mr. Hissick's report, they're spending like a large or disproportionate amount of their time doing administrative functions for disclosure instead of being able to go and be involved in some of these investigations. The other piece is that we have lost so much staff. So we actually pulled, last year, we had one municipal employee who did have some skills and experience in major crime disclosure. We actually pulled him out of his job and had him working with the major crime unit 1 to 2 days a week just to help them keep their heads above water. But he left. We don't have him anymore. That's not an option for us. As you heard me say earlier, we've lost half our staff this year. We're on thin ice in terms of our administrative support experience. We have new people, brand new people into very challenging administrative jobs, and they're trying to learn their jobs. And so we're really, we're juggling a lot, to tell you that, yeah. And we don't have that option. We also had a member last year who was on administrative duties that we pulled into that position to help, like, because they were not able to be operational. So we had them, but they're also off on maternity leave now, so we don't have that option anymore. We're out of options. And now it's the three, and they can't do both.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Thank you very much for that, broadening that understanding out. Thank you.
You can tell I'm a little bit passionate about it. Sorry.
Thank you. I'll turn to Mr. Edwards next, please, from CAO.
Thank you, Mayor, and just to add a little bit of my understanding of the request that's before you is also that with the advent of some new technologies, and especially the body-worn cameras, the amount of data management that's occurring that didn't previously occur is grown tremendously, and I believe that the detachments are all seeing a significant increase in evidence requests from Crown councils to make their cases or to make a determination as to whether they would press charges and take action further, and that all rests with the detachment. And so we're seeing like multiple areas of the entire judicial system being under stress and strain. And it starts right here at the local detachment with the apprehensions and the collection of evidence and the growing requirements from the Crown Council side to have that evidence processed in a standardized way that's just placing a really big burden on our team.
Thanks, Mr. Edwards. We do have a staff recommendation. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you. I'll move the recommendation that a new major crime disclosure clerk position for the City of North Saanich RCMP detachment, allowing the detachment to initiate the hiring process near the end of 2025 be approved.
Second.
We have it moved in second. I'll turn to the movers.
No further motivation. Thank you for your patience in seeing this be able to move forward. Certainly we appreciate the work that your team are doing.
Thank you. Councillor Novick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If it's all right with you, I do have a question for staff, which somehow I didn't get to. Through you to Mr. Hissick, could you perhaps explain why there's a discrepancy, why the difference in the amount the town has to pay as compared to the District of North Saanich? I assume our populations are approximately equal, and I don't understand the difference.
Through the chair to Councillor Novak, our administrative cost sharing is based on the number of officers in each respective jurisdiction, and we have 16 to North Saanich is 12.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you for coming forward this evening.
Thank you very much, Mayor and
Appreciate your
Council,
information.
for your support on this, and I will be, as Mr. Hissick said, I'll be speaking to North Saanich next week, and hopefully we are successful there too. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you again. So returning to our agenda, we're turning to number 7, adoption of minutes. A look for motion to approve the minutes of our regular council meeting of October 27th.
So moved.
Councillor Duck and Novick, any corrections to those minutes? Seeing none, those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. The next item is Mayor's Report. Just one item this evening, and that is the CRD Board highlights from the October 8th CRD Board meeting. I normally don't highlight further these highlights that are provided because there are great links to staff reports, appendices, and so on. But there's one matter that has been ongoing from last term into this term with regards to the CRD Board having a priority to try to establish a regional performing arts facility support service. And when I last spoke, I indicated that it was coming forward from the committee to the board at this meeting. There is a lengthy staff report that's appended here, as well as I think 6 or 7 appendices. And so I have provided council members with 4 summary pages that I just want to speak to very briefly. Members of the public can certainly connect to those pages within the agenda package that was published. So on the front page, councillors, you see that the Performing Arts Facilities Select Committee did the work over the last 4 or 5 years through two election terms, and reviewed 5 options and gave direction to staff to bring forward an establishing bylaw. The board considered that bylaw on October the 8th and gave it 3 readings, and the next steps in the process will be to, the board also approved an electric consent process of alternate approval that'll happen in the winter of 25, early 26. And then in the spring of 26, it will go to, if it passes AAP, it will go to the Inspector of Municipalities for bylaw adoption at the province, and then it will come back to the CRD, and we'll take the remainder of the year to incorporate the service into the budget and establish it effective January of 2027. So, as I've spoken to before, but a summary for those who may be listening this evening, is the work that was undertaken last term by the committee staff, CRD staff, and the consultant was to establish regionally important performing arts centers, and 3 were identified early on after contacting over 200 venues throughout the Capital Regional District. And they are the Royal Theatre, the McPherson Theatre, and the Charlie White Theatre at the Mary Winspear Centre. And once that was done, a bylaw was brought to the board last term, but the board decided not to move it forward and decided to refer it to the current board in this 22 to 26 term. And we went back, engaged another consultant, went back and consulted with municipalities, and we felt we had to bring more parts to this bylaw so that other municipalities could see benefits. Other municipalities that didn't have one of the 3 regional theaters in them could see benefits to being a part of this service. And so, if you go to the second page, the elements of the new service, as expanded this term, is there is a planning grants program, and the planning grants program is to support feasibility studies, consultations, business planning, and construction plans for performing arts facilities development. So this could be an expansion to one of the existing 3 theaters, or it could be for the creation of a new theater. And the West Shore municipalities have been engaged for the last 5 or 6 years in trying to establish a performing arts facility in the neighborhood of 500 seats. And this will help facilitate that process when it takes next steps. The second part of this service is to develop, and that is capital funding for capital improvements to current regional theaters and future regional theaters that, for example, may be on the West Shore. The third component is operating funding to support the ongoing operations of the current 3 regional theaters, and if there was a future regional theater, it could be supported as well. And one of the more innovative components that was added to this service is referred to as the Theater Rental Grants Program, to help nonprofit community presenters offset their theater rental costs. And the way we arrived at that was that, particularly coming out of the pandemic, where performances and rehearsal time went way down at the 3 main theaters, is they found that they actually had to increase their rates. And when the groups were trying to get back starting again, they found it more challenging to actually rehearse as often and perform as often. So this theater rental grants will be an assist to those nonprofit groups. So those funds won't go to the 3 theaters, they will go to nonprofit groups that want to rent these 3 space in these 3 theaters to either to rehearse. If you go to the next page, this brings out the cost apportion, this brings out the financial benefits under each of the programs. And so the total service will cost is estimated in 2027 to cost $2,340,000 $120,000 of that is set aside for planning grants in 2027. The minor capital grants for the Mary Winspear Centre would be up to $125,000 in 2027 and take a step up to $150,000 in 2028, and then have an inflationary increase, a small inflationary increase in years after that. In the operating fund, the Charlie White Theatre would receive $245,000 in 2027, and it would step up to $310,000 in 2028, and then have an inflationary increase, smaller inflationary increases after that. So it was CRD staff in consultation with Mary Winspear Centre, Charlie White staff, that decided to step that part of those parts of the programs in over 2 years. So that's the benefit, potential benefit to the Mary Winspear Centre. How will that operate? Each of those components will either have operating agreements, so the CRD and the independent Memorial Park Society would enter into agreements for minor capital, for operating, or for or planning grants. And similar to other agreements, they would have reporting mechanisms that they would have to provide to the CRD, and so forth. The last page briefly shows the cost apportionment to all of the participating jurisdictions. So the CRD has 13 municipalities and 3 electoral areas. All 13 municipalities have agreed to participate in one of the 3 electoral areas. And using the calculation that is shown in that chart, Town of Sydney residents using 2025 population and assessment data, so that's the data that's available today. The cost per average residential assessment would be $9.48. So that will change in terms of when the service comes into effect in 2027, but it is and it shows what the comparators are to all of the other jurisdictions. So that's a little bit about the process that was undertaken and how it's going forward, what the benefits are to our Charlie White Theatre at the Mary Winspear Centre, and what the ballpark costs are to taxpayers going forward. I'll take any questions. I'll begin with Councillor Garnett, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And I think Councillor Novick asked this question when you first brought this item back, but it was too early in the process to provide clarification. So, from a Town of Sydney taxpayer perspective, given that we have a funding agreement with Mary Winspear, 2.5% of taxes, which was just under $370,000 in this calendar year, I'm not fully understanding how they came to the numbers they came to. Is there an allowance for the fact that our residents already contribute tax-wise to the Mary Winspear Centre and the Charlie White Theatre through that funding, in terms of the model of what we pay? I guess what I'm trying to ask is, would we be asking our residents to pay twice for the Charlie White Theatre?
The answer to that is yes, and there are examples of other municipal and CRD services where that occurs. I asked the Chief Financial Officer of the CRD for that. But the way to view this service is, if you go to that 4th chart, under the calculation, Sydney taxpayers would be paying $80,000 into the overall service of about $2.4 million. But what is happening is were determined to be regionally important facilities, and how that was ascertained was that using ticketing information from the 3 theatres, basically people from all 16 jurisdictions are going to these 3 regional facilities on a regular basis. And so Sydney taxpayers are now actually contributing to the Royal Theatre and to the McPherson Theatre. And similarly, all of the residents outside of Sydney are contributing to the Charlie White Theatre.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Dutt?
Yeah, thank you. So you mentioned that in the winter of 25-26, this is going to an AAP, alternative approval process. Is that a regional AAP, or does each municipality go through that process?
It's a regional AAP.
So how will our residents know that they are to participate in this AAP if it's how's it gonna be promoted? How are they gonna be recognize their contribution?
Yeah, AAPs are approved it's one of the three mechanisms provided for by provincial legislation, and the provincial legislation sets requirements for how AAPs are conducted. And there's a certain level of information that the local government conducting the AAP has to provide, make available to all of the residents. So the CRD has done 2 or 3 AAPs in the last couple of years, and will be conducting that process and providing the information to residents throughout the region to participate.
So in doing that AAP here, will we augment the CRD's information to identify to our residents the contribution we're making to the Charlie White Theatre already, just for the sake of their information, they understand the funding mechanism for Charlie White is actually being increased, and the reasons for that?
What I can say is that all of the information that is appended to these reports, I've just brought out 4 pages to outline the service and the benefits to the theatres and the costs. All of the information will be available to the residents when they're participating in the AAP.
Okay, so in that process, will we be going through some distinctive communication to our residents that allows them to understand the process here?
Well, sorry, I'll take another stab at your question that you've rephrased, and that is the CRD does have their processes. The town of Sydney, or any of the 14 jurisdictions, the 13 municipalities in the 1 electoral area, can certainly supplement in terms of communication. They're not obligated to under provincial legislation. It's the local government conducting the AAP that is required to provide engagement at a certain level. But there's certainly no harm. In fact, of course there's benefit if we were to provide information that this process was underway.
Okay, thank you. My second question was, should this be approved through whatever methods, and we go into this funding model, will we be revisiting the Charlie White funding contract we have with Mary Winspear and the Memorial Park Society to do any adjustments to that? Because essentially we're upscaling their ability to do that, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I just think it would be, given the financial constraints we will experience and double-digit increases in our taxes, we'll be looking at different ways to manage that, and I just see this as a potential way that we can.
That would be, and that would come through an initiative of council. It isn't something that staff would bring forward. It would be a council. Since we have signed a long-term agreement with, or an established agreement with Memorial Park Society for the funding that we provide on behalf of the residents, on behalf of the taxpayers of the town of Sydney, certainly during budget time, it would be within the purview of a council member to bring it forward for discussion.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Duncan, please.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just gonna, I guess, follow up on Councillor Duck's. So when this comes out with the AAP process begins, is this something that we would put in like the town talk and on our town, like Facebook page, just that, like a link to the CRD process, or is it all of the advertisement goes through the CRD? Like, I know for other processes, it would be things like their pop-up, they would have pop-ups at the community center that was impacted if it was to do with that, or so you could imagine them having information at the Mary Winspear itself for where theater goers would see it, but for the community at large that wouldn't necessarily be there. Does the municipality have leeway to direct people to it?
I would have to leave staff to comment on that, and I'm not sure they're prepared to do that this evening, but one thing I would comment on is that this is a CRD requirement. We wouldn't want it to be confusing to residents to think whether this was a Sydney AAP or a CRD AAP. The other thing I'll say is that I touched on very briefly that the CRD has conducted other AAPs. So our Sydney residents have been a part of 3 AAPs in the past year and a half. A transportation AAP, a Foodlands Trust AAP, and an environmental conservation alternative approval process. And I would have to turn to staff. I don't know if we provided information to our residents on any of those 3 alternative approval processes. Mr. Edwards.
Thank you, Mayor. No, we did not put out any special notices about the CRD previous AAPs, and I don't think staff would be inclined to do anything different for this one unless directed by council.
No, that's fine with me. I agree with not wanting to confuse it. It's just knowing that we'd had other AAPs with the CRD and that public feedback on those, when people don't like what they came up with or the tax increase that goes with it. The Foodlands Trust, we received a fair number of letters about that it's the CRD that takes that feedback and figures out how better to make sure that the public hears about the process during that time. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for the questions. I saw Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor O'Toole.
Okay, thank you. Just getting back to colleagues' comments or questions about our contribution perhaps being renegotiated with Mary Winspear Centre, and you said that should come up at budget time. And I guess is budget time the time? Like, I guess I'm wondering how much lead time would staff need to kind of prepare an analysis for us in terms of what do we currently give to Mary Winspear Centre? How would this impact that? And at what point, in which year's budget process should that be for the, I guess for the 2026?
2027.
2027, okay. It said, okay, I see 2026, 27 is when they're gonna incorporate it into the 2027 budget. Okay, so just wondering, maybe a question through you to staff in terms of if council wanted to bring that up, when would you like to see a motion or some direction come on that?
Sorry, it's not that staff aren't wanting to see a motion. You're asking what would be a reasonable process. What would be the timing of a process?
Yes, well, yeah, that's what I'm asking.
I think if council were wanting to consider this a potential reduction in the town's contribution relative to the new revenue from the regional service, the more time staff had to consider that and engage, we would need to engage directly with the Mary Winspear folks, because we don't understand the financial implications that would have upon them. You know, I'm not trying to make a plug for the Mary Winspear at this moment, but I do know that they have pretty challenging capital campaign or initiatives underway with some of the structure replacement requirements, such as their roof. And initial discussions at a staff level have seen this as an opportunity to help support those capital challenges that they would be facing and may have otherwise come to the town or other funders and donors for that support. But so those are the types of analysis and questions that we'd want to undertake, and we would have to engage Mary Winspear to better understand the implications of that.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, my thinking is I don't think, it didn't seem to me like budget time was necessarily the time to bring that up, because you would want to have those discussions. Also, Mary Winspear is doing long-term planning, and I presume in 5-year planning cycles. And so if we were going to pull the plug on any amount of their funding, I presume that they would want to know as far in advance as possible then. Okay, thank you.
So again, we will all hear when the alternative approval process is complete sometime into next spring. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I'm, I guess, a little uncomfortable with the discussion, you know, turning to what I think is a good news story to, you know, let's analyze what we can do differently in terms of our own level of support to the Mary Winspear Centre, which is not just an arts and culture centre, but an economic catalyst for the town as well. You know, I just want to verify, I think, through the mayor, if I understood your comments correctly, that a large portion of the funding that will be available is indeed towards capital projects. And Mr. Edwards made reference to the sorts of challenges the Mary Winspear Centre faces with regard to some of its capital intent. And so whether it's adding seating or, you know, expansion of the theater as an example, or something of that nature. It sounded in your overview as if some of the capital projects of that nature may well be supported through this initiative. I think you said to the tune of $125,000 potentially in the first year, and that we'd be paying in $80,000. So we're already up there, so to speak, in terms of the benefit to the community. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah, no, the amount calculated is $80,000 in the first year of capital grants is 125,000, or sorry, is 125,000, second year 150, and then it grows. But as I think I might have touched on last meeting when I indicated I would be speaking to it at this meeting, is that the executive director presented to both the committee in early October and at the board meeting, and the board chair and other directors were in attendance as well. And they spoke to the, I don't know that they used the term desperate, but they spoke to the significant need that the Mary Winspear Center Memorial Park Society has had. They're celebrating their 25th anniversary this year, and they have had challenges on the capital side on the entire time, and on the operating side as well. So, as Mr. Edwards indicated, we would certainly want to engage with Mary Winspear and determine the implications of any potential decisions that we might consider. You
Thank
did
you.
have the floor.
No, thank you.
Councillor Novick.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm listening to all this, and it somewhat disturbs me. But I'll ask you what I think is a fairly simple question. Would it be fair to say that one of the reasons that the CRD came up with this plan was because all three of these theaters are having difficulty surviving on their own, and this additional funding will ensure that they continue to offer support of the arts in our community for the foreseeable future, at least?
Yes, it was identified when the first select committee was established in about 2019, and I was a member of that committee representing the peninsula, was that the current financial model for these three theaters, or the financial model at the time, and it didn't get any better during the pandemic or coming out of the pandemic, is not working well for the three regional theaters.
Thank you.
And there was a large attendance from the community in support of this service to sustain the arts ecosystem that we have throughout the region.
And I'm assuming that the numbers on this report were not just random numbers. These were numbers that were studied with regard to each theater to determine what it would take for each of these theaters to retain their sustainability for the foreseeable future. Would that be correct?
There was a lot of work done by consultants and CRD art staff to arrive at those numbers, yes, in consultation with the respective theaters.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So thank you for the questions, and we are in a process, and we'll certainly hear back, as I say, when the alternative approval process is considered. And it does have to go back again. It has to go to the inspectors and municipalities, and then come back to the board sometime next spring. Thank you. I'll turn to our council report, single council report this evening. Councillor Garnett, a report from the Panorama Recreation Center. Sorry, just before you speak, Councillor, it is in the CRD Board highlights. On the second page, there is reference to the Peninsula Recreation Facility in Central Saanich and the Arena Accessibility Improvement Project that Councillor Garnett is going to speak to. And normally I would speak to things that are in the CRD highlights report. The CRD, Panorama Recreation is a CRD sub-regional service with the three peninsula municipalities, and their recommendations do go to the board, and hence it appeared on the agenda. But while I sit on the Panorama Rec Commission representing Sydney as a CRD representative, as a CRD director, Councillor Garnett represents our municipal council, and we have a citizen representing citizens. So I'll turn to Councillor Garnett to speak to it.
Thank you, Mayor. This will be very brief. As the mayor's mentioned, we both sit, and Councillor Rintoul is the alternate, so he has been to several of the meetings regarding these two items, so is well versed in them. Eventually, at some point, it's okay. Eventually, at some point, these two items will follow, because of the loan authorization bylaws, will follow electoral approval process, and has been mentioned earlier, there's three. There's the alternative approval process, which is the AAP commonly referred to, that the mayor's mentioned, could go to a general referendum, which could happen on a designated day, or 2026 happens to be an election year, it could be part of an election question on the ballot, or it could go through municipal consent. And this is why I'm just bringing this to the attention of the other 4 members of council tonight, just to let you know that there's been no formal discussion about what process this will take. The commission will eventually make a decision at some point in the future, recommendation to the board, and the board makes a decision. But at this point, I thought it would be pertinent to advise the other 4 members of council that this will at some point, probably, I think, there's no timeline, but probably next year in the spring sometime, we might see something. And just so that you can prepare yourselves and have the relevant information if it does come back to us for municipal consent, because that'll be all 3 peninsula municipalities, Central Saanich, North Saanich, and Sydney, and it has to be unanimous, so all 3 councils have to agree for it to proceed. So what I can tell you is that the information is available on the Peninsula Recreation Commission site, but I also have agendas from October 2nd and the 23rd, and I was just going to advise you that I will email them to you, so that you have plenty of time to digest the information, and then be able to, if it does come to that eventuality for a decision process, that you will be able to make an informed decision. And that's just want to provide you, just to give you a chance to know that this will be coming on the horizon. It may or may not come back to us in that capacity, but at least it's what you can be prepared. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. So I just want to note, just because of the process, that the Peninsula Recreation Commission, which has 9 commissioners, 3 from Sydney, 3 from North Saanich, and 3 from Central Saanich. So that 9-member commission has agreed in principle to engage in a partnership with the District of Central Saanich to construct a recreation facility within Central Saanich's civic redevelopment project at Hovey Road. And when it came to the board directed that the 5-year Peninsula Recreation Capital Plan be amended to include this recreation facility project, including $1 million from capital reserves in 2026 and an additional $14.2 million in project funding. And as Councillor Garnett indicated, that would be subject to an electoral approval process, and that will come for first the Commission's consideration sometime early next spring, or approximately next spring. And a partnership agreement with the District of Central Saanich will be developed and brought to the Peninsula Recreation Commission for consideration, and following agreement approval, staff will work to further update the budget for a loan authorization bylaw. And again, as Councillor Garnett indicated, there are 3 approval processes provided by provincial legislation. It is municipal consent by all 3, it would go to all 3 participating councils, and has to be unanimous. It could go to an AAP process, or it could go to a referendum, and the Commission will make a recommendation to the board at that time. Thanks again, Councillor. Are there any questions? We're going to committee reports, and the first, we have 2 this evening. The first, under 12A, is the Saanich Peninsula Accessibility Advisory Committee. We're receiving their minutes from their September 25th meeting. We don't require a motion, and we have a recommendation. Councillor O'Keefe is our representative on the commission. Could you take us through the recommendation, please?
O'Keefe is the person I'm the person who sat on this one, so I will move this one, because I spoke to it in my councillor report last meeting. So the recommendation was, and I so move, that the Town of Sydney Off-Street Parking and Loading Bylaw number 2140 be amended to clarify that 1, accessible parking spaces are not eligible for reduction through payment in lieu provision. 2, any request to reduce accessible parking must proceed by way of a variance application with referral to the Saanich Peninsula Accessibility Advisory Committee for comment. And 3, if a variance is granted permitting pay in lieu of accessible parking spaces, that the funds collected shall be dedicated to projects that directly improve accessibility for people with disabilities within the Town of Sydney.
Second.
We have it moved in second. I'll turn to back to you, Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, just briefly, this arose out of the committee seeing our application for the condo or the multi-unit over commercial on 5th Street next to the Star Cinema, where pay in lieu for some of the accessible spaces that would be for residents in the back was made. And while in this case this made a lot of sense and was suitable for this building, they were worried about this always being done by staff without it coming forward to council first. So this would just kind of flip this around so that they make sure there's no kind of a default to being able to take these spaces away, and that this doesn't become, they realize that some spaces should be perhaps used for pay in lieu, because in this particular case, it made sense with the building, and they were fine with allowing that to be a possibility, but they did want it to come before council so that it was transparent and something that the accessibility committee would be able to weigh in on before you know, the developer thought that it was a go-ahead and it would be walked back on them later.
Thank you. Councillor Duck?
Nothing at this time.
Councillor O'Keefe and Councillor O'Toole.
Sure. Just a little bit more background on this. As an example, North Saanich had a development, I think it was last year, and the developer wanted a reduction in pay, a reduction in spaces for that development. And so the practice at North Saanich went through was they did bring it towards SPAC. So staff presented to SPAC to say the developer is requesting fewer spaces. You know, the rationale is this, staff think this, and then so the SPAC committee members provided feedback, and in the end, I think council did listen to the feedback from SPAC. They still did allow some reduction in spaces, but it made sense for that particular development. So that's kind of what they're looking for. And in regards to the funds going to improve accessibility for people with disabilities, discussions about that, I believe in our pay in lieu, in our bylaw, it talks about using those funds for active transportation sorts of things. So they're saying, okay, if you're going to take away accessible spots, then it should be things that will improve our ability to navigate around the town. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor O'Toole.
Thank you. Just as a point of order, I'd like to request that the three recommendations be voted on separately.
Yes?
Yep.
They will now be considered separately. Are there any other speakers? If not, I would like to turn to staff. Mr. Edwards, I'm not going to speak to what I see are possible conflicts within these three recommendations, but can staff speak to whether there is sufficient information here to implement this, or whether staff really needs to review this in terms of our existing bylaws and processes and report back to staff on what is possible?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I would recommend that this be referred to staff for comment to report back to council. I would appreciate that these types of recommendations that come from committee would go through staff before council does make consideration. Staff have had no chance to review or consider the recommendation prior to it really showing up here. So I think it would be beneficial if council were to make a recommendation to refer this to staff for consideration and report back at a future council.
Thank you. Councillor O'Toole, you had the floor. If I may just make a comment, I mean, the motion is seeking to amend a current bylaw. If normally when we're amending a bylaw, we have a staff report speaking to what the implications are of amending a bylaw. Councillor O'Toole?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to ensure that we were going to vote on these separately because I don't support the second recommendation here, but having heard what staff have suggested, I concur. This should come back, should be referred to staff for comment. However, we do have a motion, I guess 3 separate motions on the floor now, is that correct?
So while the motions are on the floor, council can make a referral motion if the referral motion is for staff to bring a report back on this.
So moved.
We have it moved and seconded. Further discussion?
No, I concur with the comments made by the CAO.
Likewise, I was kind of surprised to see a committee external to council recommending a bylaw change to our bylaws.
Thank you.
Seems to be out of order.
Thank you. Councillor Keefe?
Thanks. First of all, in regards to the comment about it being out of order to make recommendations, that's kind of the purpose for SPAC, to identify things that need to be changed and to bring that. So that's part of their terms of reference. So I wouldn't characterize it as being out of order. In regards to staff not being familiar with this, my understanding is that there was some back and forth with staff on this. Staff were in attendance at the meeting. Often what happens at SPAC, it's unusual actually, in the last few years for recommendations from SPAC to come to council and then be referred back to staff for comment and then come back again. Because usually what happens at SPAC is staff are in attendance, and we often have a really good dialogue with staff in terms of, is this something that you think is reasonable? So my understanding is that they were at the meeting and they were familiar with this, and so I would have thought that since they were familiar, if they had concerns, that they would be bringing that forward, or?
Well, sorry, Councillor, I did ask after the motion was put onto the floor if staff had any comment with regards to implementing this and whether they would prefer an opportunity to have it referred to them so they could bring a report back, and Mr. Edwards spoke to that, so.
Okay.
Are you motivating one way on the referral motion? We have a referral motion and it's really to motivate on the referral motion at this point.
Yeah, no, I'm not comfortable with it at this point, but I'll listen to, I think Councillor Duncan had some comments to make, so.
Councillor Duncan?
Yeah, having been at the meeting, of course, staff from the municipalities were there and they did have a discussion. The sticking point from my recollection was actually not the second item, but rather the third, that because it goes into the active transportation fund pool, and most of those are things that can benefit, members with mobility issues, that trying to distinguish which things a part of the transportation plan were specifically directed for accessibility for people with disabilities, like a curb cut. Obviously people with disabilities can also use bike lanes, they can use flashing lights. So basically, whether this was something that staff would actually be able to separate out, or that rather that simply going into an active transportation plan kind of by default improves accessibility. And that would probably, to have SPAC weigh in on that separately versus having staff being able to justify that in how they pool funds and disperse funds, I feel was the point where staff might want to really be able to say, this is how we're collecting this money and how it goes out and how we're justifying it was still improving accessibility for everyone. And so I'm okay with a referral motion from that perspective of staff making sure that it's really clear when they do this how that pot of money is going, because from the perspective of referrals for bylaw, the first two are easy enough to just kind of blanket say staff no longer do this on their own, but the third one would make it very hard for staff operationally without them being able to think it through. And so by moving these separately and having staff have a chance to report back on that one, I think would probably be a good idea.
Thank you. Turn to Mr. Edwards again.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And again, I just want to be clear that I think for us, when we're amending bylaws, we want to make sure that our staff have had a thorough review and consideration of that. And it's not that I'm opposed to SPAC making recommendations. It's rather, I don't know to what extent staff may have been prepared in it coming to that committee meeting with this information. And it's one thing to have discussions in the moment about whether or not this seems reasonable in comparison to doing a more investigative and considered research on the matter. And so that's all I would be suggesting, is that if council were to refer this to staff, we can rest assured that we've had a more considered approach to it. And without trying to be critical of the recommendations, I do find it confusing with the first recommendation stating that accessible parking spaces are not eligible for reduction through payment. But yet if we do approve them for reduction for payment in lieu of, then it has to be done in this way. It's sort of contradictory in nature, and so that's why, in part two, I would like staff to be able to review it and report back.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards. Any further discussion on the referral motion? Councillor Duck.
Yeah, just to understand process, so if I could through to staff, the motion remains as is in three parts. It's pending the referral motion for this to come back from staff report, so it doesn't change the nature of the motion. The motion exists, and we're just looking for staff input on the motion, just to make sure that. And my second question is, what's the timing on that?
I understand from our Director of Planning that that his team intend to be looking at this bylaw in particular, and for a more comprehensive review and consideration. And so, and my understanding is that they would intend to take up that work in the next, within the next month. I don't know how long it will actually take to complete. So I would anticipate it coming back to council. If we're undertaking the full bylaw review, that would not be until some point in the spring, probably at the soonest.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, I'll call a question on the referral. All in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you.
Point of order?
Yes?
Can I suggest a 5-minute recess?
Yes, let us recess until, for 5 minutes, just after 22. Okay, we'll reconvene, and we're now turning to the second of the committee reports under 12B, the Committee of the Whole meeting of November 3rd. We're receiving the minutes on our agenda. Are there any corrections to the minutes? Seeing none, we don't require a motion, and we had 3 recommendations. Councillor Duncan, you chaired the meeting. I will turn to you to read in the recommendation. Take us through the recommendations, please.
Okay, recommendation 1 for development permit application number.
Sorry, you just
Oh,
need to read
just
the
the,
recommendation.
sorry, the recommendation. Committee recommends, and I so move, the development permit application number DP 100854 to permit the form and character of a 3-unit residential development for the property at 9601 5th Street be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for review and comment.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you.
Okay, recommendation 2, committee recommends, I so move, that development permit application number DP 100855 to permit the form and character of a 3-unit residential development. Oh, that's so forth, okay, for the property at 9601 4th Street be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for review and comment.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimous.
And committee recommends, and I so move, the development permit application number DP 100856 to permit the form and character of a 3-unit residential development for the property at 2436 Ocean Avenue be forwarded to the Advisory Planning Commission for review and comment.
Second.
Thank you again. Discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? That carries unanimous. Thanks, Councillor Duncan, for taking us through those. We're now turning to staff reports. We have 4 this evening. The first, under 13A, is public feedback regarding the proposed off-leash dog park in Iroquois Park. I'll turn to our Director of Engineering, Mr. Murphy, for an introduction, please.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. So tonight's report is regarding the public feedback received for the proposed off-leash dog park in Iroquois Park. So this proposal initiated back in the summer and was in conjunction with the discussions and the change in regulations to prohibit off-leash dogs in sports courts. And so with that prohibition, along with a need identified in the 2018 Parks Master Plan for an off-leash dog park on the east side of the city, it was proposed that a potential location could be Iroquois Park, adjacent to the tennis courts there, with the intention of providing dog owners an alternative space for off-leash dog use that would be adjacent to the tennis courts, so as to further discourage dog owners from using the tennis courts for off-leash dogs. So this idea was put forward for public feedback in September. Public feedback was collected and is summarized in the report, with, as usual, a mix of in favor and opposed, more in favor than opposed in this case, and those opposed mostly concerned about changing the nature of Iroquois Park by installing a new off-leash dog park. So at this stage, this is still a concept, and early cost estimates would be $20,000 to $30,000 to install this dog park. We would envision it having a variety of basic features, being fenced with double gates and some whatever the surface covering would be appropriate, and drainage and benches and that sort of thing, and would be designed with ideally a space for small dogs and a space for larger dogs. And through the design process, we would want to look at other existing dog parks of a similar nature and learn from what they've learned about what works and doesn't work and how to design the best possible dog park for that space. At this point, seeking direction from council to essentially continue the discussion, to have this proposed dog park, off-leash dog park for Iroquois Park be part of the upcoming budget discussions. So this isn't requesting a final decision at this point in time. And so a final decision would come as part of the budget deliberations, but certainly understand this is a big potential change for Iroquois Park and for the community, and understand, as always, there's a variety of perspectives on it, and certainly open to council's direction on how to proceed.
Thanks, Mr. Murphy, for the introduction. Just to touch on process, Council, in our discussions, I mean, certainly we'll go to questions next, but in our discussions, while there's a staff recommendation to forward to the budget, if through our deliberations tonight, we do not wish to put it through to budget, there's one of two scenarios. One is we do not wish to move forward with a dog park and pursue any other option. Another one is to pursue a different option or some variation on this option prior to going to budget deliberations. Otherwise, we would be forwarding this with any other consideration or direction that council wants to give. So potentially there is a decision tonight in terms of if council chooses not to go forward any further with this, or go forward with changes, or just refer it as is to budget. I'll turn to questions for staff. Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you. I know we had lots of email on this today. Thank you for that. But I'll just clarify a couple things, just because I think this will be of high interest to the public. And I think good things for them to be aware of. So my understanding from additional information, well, first of all, I think it's important for the public to know and remind council that we did consider Iroquois Park.
Sorry, Councillor O'Keefe, this is question time.
Yes. Yeah.
So
and so yes, I understand that. So what I'm going to ask then is, this was previously considered as a location in 2022, and at that time, staff didn't think it was an appropriate location, and neither did council. And so we abandoned even considering Iroquois. And so I think it's important for the public to understand, if we went through a fair amount of time back then and found it not to be suitable fit, why are we now considering it?
Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor, through you to Councillor O'Keefe. I wasn't here when it went forward with the proposal for Resthaven Park, and so I'm speaking from information from staff and from the past reports that I've gleaned myself. And so my understanding is that the primary driver at this point in time was inappropriate use of sports courts for off-leash dogs, and so it was kind of resurfaced as this need does exist for an off-leash space. And it was clearly communicated to staff through council and the public that Resthaven Park was not an option. And so in looking at the remainder of options available to the town, and considering the emergent priority around trying to discourage the use of sports courts, Iroquois Park was deemed as reasonable and preferential for this type of park. And so what was proposed at Resthaven Park was a much larger park, off-leash dog area, 5 times the size of what's being proposed right now. And so it's a very different proposal on the table now than what was being proposed back then. And then additionally, staff have, with these recent issues and concerns of dogs being allowed off leash in sports courts, staff have been made aware of other urban centers, both locally and across the water in the Lower Mainland, that have these much smaller off-leash parks, and they seem to be functioning relatively fine. And so through learning about those, that again made Iroquois Park seem like a reasonable proposal.
Okay, so just to confirm my understanding and for benefit of the public as well, it seems to me that really the impetus for this was those dog owners that we heard about in July who were allowing their pets on the tennis court and not picking up after them, and so that was obviously not a good situation. I recall at that time that we also made some changes to our bylaws to have fines and that sort of thing. So I'm wondering, I believe we haven't had a chance to put the signs up yet and post the amount of those fines. Is just clarifying, that's okay. And also, we don't know yet if we've done any enforcement in terms of trying to get people to comply with, keeping their pets out of the sports court. Okay. Thank you for that. So I think the other thing I just want to clarify is that it seems to me when I look at the information that we went out to with the public, we advertise this as an off-leash dog area. And I think when you say that, people think this is going to be a place where I'm going to chuck my ball way down the way and the dog can go fetch it and get lots of exercise and that sort of thing. And I think some of the comments we got sort of indicated that that was people's expectation. But from what I'm hearing now is my understanding is that this would not be suitable for large dogs. And this is a different, staff have said they wouldn't recommend this for large dogs, that they would still need to go to Hampson Park or some other place. And that it's not necessarily the off-leash park where dogs could have a lot of room to run around on, because, as you said, it's 1/5 the size of Rest Haven. So I'm just wanting to make sure I've captured my understanding of that correctly.
Thank you,
Mr.
Mayor.
Rivers?
I don't think the intention ever was for this to be the type of off-leash dog park that you would exercise large dogs to the point where they would feel they've got their physical needs met for exercise. I think right from the get-go, when this was brought in the summer, it was understood that this was more of a pocket-sized park solution, and that for those who really had vigorous dogs that needed a good run, that this is not the place for them to achieve that. However, it would still be appropriate for large dogs. This is not by any means inappropriate for that. But if I had a large dog that required a tremendous amount of exercise, it would be the kind of place where I might stop as a highlight or as like a mid-walk type break to let the dog off leash and to have some social time and to just run free a little bit. And it doesn't need to be excessively large for them to enjoy that space. And so, I would concur that if your goal as a dog owner is to go to a dog park to allow your dog off leash to get its full run, then this is not the park for you. And that was clearly communicated early on in the process, and it's also clearly indicated in the maps that were provided to the public. Like this is a very small off-leash dog park area. I don't think we've misled anybody. I think it's been pretty clear all the way along what the intent is here.
Thank you. Councillor Key?
Yeah, okay, I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Garnett, then Councillor Duck.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. Just one question, and just coming out of what your comments earlier, Mr. Murphy. So the final plans, if it goes forward to budget, would come back to council for consideration and comment?
Through the mayor to Councillor Garnett. So normally a project of this size, of the scope, would be managed by staff and would be handled by staff, but recognizing the high visibility of this, certainly can offer to bring it back to council for some input on the proposed design.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Duck?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Through staff, if I may. The justification for this location is it was proximate to the basketball courts that were being used inappropriately. Were there any other locations given consideration, or is that you're hoping that by putting it here, you defer people from there versus maybe, as one letter writer suggested, across the road in Tallista Park?
Mr. Edwards?
Yeah, through the mayor to Councillor Duck, the consideration was given to other locations, but this was deemed to be preferential in large part to address that concern of people using sports courts. And some of the thinking was that out of sight, out of mind. And so if the off-leash dog park was proximal to the sports courts, then it's less likely that the sports courts would be used inappropriately, even with the ban in our bylaw now. And so that was the main driving factor.
Thank you. Are other sites being considered in addition to this, or is this the one? Because there was some indication that, Southampton is not in Sydney, so what are the dog parks or other dog parks? I know Resthaven has been set aside as a migratory location, but are we giving thought to other locations?
And currently, the only other location in Sydney that is used as an off-leash dog area is the Peter Grant Park, and that is the size of park that gives dogs the ability, and larger dogs, the ability to have a good run. And so, but the intention here was to have a park that was adjacent to the core of town and on the east side of the highway. But at this time, staff aren't looking at adding more beyond this. I think it would be a wait and see. So if council were to approve this to go forward, it would be wait and see how this unfolds and how it gets utilized and how the community responds to it. And if it proves to be successful, there may be a desire to add others or perhaps something completely different.
Yeah, I would agree. Certainly, you give an indication to the location, to the safety of this location. I think there's some misinterpretation that dogs will be running amok in Iroquois Park, but that's not the case. It's inside this safely enclosed and double gated location. So I think it's clear to the public that this will be a location, as you've indicated, to provide dogs in particular an opportunity for a break from the leash. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Duff. Councillor Rintoul, please.
I'd like to make the motion.
I just have one question, and Councillor Garnett asked a question in terms of, and correct me if I'm wrong in paraphrasing, but would there be additional information coming forward? If this was to move forward tonight, would there be additional information? The recommendation doesn't, as worded, doesn't indicate that there would be, detailed design, if I can use that term, coming forward. You indicated, Mr. Murphy, at the start of your answer that staff would, consider this operational to implement. Can you just clarify in terms of if any additional information would other than what we've received tonight would come forward at budget deliberation, if this were to be referred?
To the mayor, yes. So normal process, once a project gets budget approval, that's typically when we start the detailed design and final feasibility and that sort of thing. So normal process, normal engineering project is when it's in budget deliberations, it's still very much at conceptual stage. And so in this case, again, given the visibility and importance, we can certainly commit to bringing forward additional information, a proposed design as best we can with the time that's available, leading into budget deliberations, so that we have hopefully a little more certainty around the cost estimate and proposed features for council to make a potential final determination at that point.
Thank you. So you wouldn't require an amendment to the motion requesting any additional information? Okay, thank you. Councillor O'Toole?
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move the recommendation that an off-leash dog area be considered for Iroquois Park as part of the 2026 budget deliberations with a separate space for large and small dogs.
Second.
Second.
We have it moved by Councillor O'Toole, seconded by Councillor Novick. I'll turn to the movers first.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm supportive of the recommendation. I recognize that this is subject to further consideration as part of the budget process. I recognize that it's been identified in our Parks Master Plan as a need, and I think overall the reception in terms of those survey responses is fairly favorable with regard to the concept and also partly to the location. I think it's probably going to be difficult to make everyone happy with respect to the location, but this is something we've chatted about frankly for years, and so it would be very nice to see us move forward with consideration for a facility that will help residents be able to get outside more and enjoy a portion of the park, which I assume is a candidate location because it's underutilized. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Novick, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I recognize that this is a controversial issue. I don't think there's a perfect solution, but I think that the solution that has been presented is a good solution, and it addresses an immediate concern, and that is maintaining the sports courts in a usable condition. I'm happy to see that the majority of letters about this have been in favor. And again, I know it's not an ideal solution, but it is a solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Garnett, then Councillor Duncan.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll support the recommendation. I also noted some of the emails we received, and I just pulled up to share your thoughts, where it says the town is gathering input on the proposal to create a fenced off-leash dog enclosure. So I was a little perplexed as to some of the thoughts that children and seniors would be knocked over. That can only happen if they were actually in the enclosure. So it just, I'm not sure how there got to be that little bit of misunderstanding when the information is quite clear. It's a bit of a compromise. We're trying to find, as Councillor Rintu spoke to, this has been an issue that we've heard about since 2018 from multiple residents, multiple emails, personal conversations on the streets. It's something that people want in the community. And it'll help to avoid the further conflicts that are arising in the courts and keep the courts for the uses that they're meant to have and the users. And anecdotally, I have seen the occasional dog still in there, but through conversations with people playing pickleball, they have noticed a reduction and they're having less conflicts already. Now that people know that we've prohibited them being in the courts, it seems to have gotten out there. This is just another layer for that. It is an underutilized piece of the property, and looking out there on the weekend, people talking about throwing a ball or having a picnic. If you go to the south of the building that's there for the Lions Club and storage and bathrooms, there's a perfect space for that exists already, and even the soccer fields if they're not in use. So there's plenty of opportunities to use the space. Just trying to create an amenity in the community that people can enjoy. And your dogs, big dogs. I have two big dogs. I have two big dogs, and they don't need to be run. A lot of a dog's enjoyment is socialization, and that is a big component for actually creating a healthy dog, to be able to go and interact with other animals in this space. So I think it'll serve that purpose. And to some of the comments about people not picking up, and you're going to get that. I mean, there's a certain segment of our population that just is not always going to follow the rules. People don't always follow the rules to drive a car, ride a bike, walk on the streets. You're never going to get away from that. So, and do you want to deny people the ability to enjoy an amenity community because some people won't treat it the proper way? Well, most people are responsible and will. So I want to give them that opportunity to have this. And so I'm more than happy to move forward to budget. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan, please.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to kind of second Councillor Garnett's point about the letters that were opposed. I don't believe there were actually any people opposed to this proposal. If you remove the ones where people seem to misunderstand the place was fenced, the number of people who had a criticism of this park drops to zero. I would say this is kind of designed to be a substitute backyard in a town where a lot of people are in condos and apartment buildings or townhomes with very small backyards. And this is about the size that you'd expect. You could come and take your dog, and they might whip around a few times. Mostly they just want to roll on that grass and sniff the other dogs' butts. And that's what this is for. Having been to many, many children's birthday parties and play dates at that splash park, where families bring their family dog, and the dog has to sit there on their leash next to the family, having this right next to where mom and dad can watch the kid in the splash park and have their dog in this park off the leash so that they can sniff all those other dogs that have shown up on their leash and want to be able to socialize with each other. This is actually the perfect location to make this a good environment for the whole family, and even have, you know, their children be able to play when grandparents bring their dogs there. They have this fenced area that they can let their children, or their children, grandchildren rather, and dogs kind of play together, where, you know, their mobility challenges won't make them feel nervous about either of them running away on them. So I think this is actually a perfect location, and that the criticisms in this case were very off point, given the way this is being designed specifically to address those points. So I'm really happy to move this forward.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor O'Keefe, please.
Thank you. I'm not in support of the motion. I'll preface my comments by saying I love dogs, been a dog owner, I'm a dog grandma. I absolutely get all the good things that dog parks provide for both dogs and people. However, I don't think this is the right place, and I don't think it's the solution for the problem that we're experiencing. So again, going back in time, not too far, but to 2022, as I said, we talked about Iroquois, and it was not deemed to be suitable for a number of reasons. That was decided, and staff decided that. The reason, what's changed now, is dogs are pooping on the tennis courts, and so we're looking for a solution to address that. In my mind, the solution for that is not putting an undersized dog park in an area that we already identified is not really a great area. The issue is dealing with the enforcement issue. I would have preferred, before we go and spend time and money on a dog park that I don't think it's going to meet the needs of the expectations of the community. We should be, if the issue is poop in sports courts, let's put enforcement in place to deal with that. Let's get the signs up. Let's hand out a few fines and then see if that remedies the solution, rather than spending a bunch of time and money on a dog court. In terms of it not being the right location, multiple uses, if you looked at some best practices from other communities, they talk about having a distance of at least 50 to 75 meters between a dog park and a playground or splash pad. So this one will be 25 meters. So that's people who know about this stuff and are recommending that. So that's a concern for me. And I think the other thing is that people are, although we have some idea of what it's meant to be used for, I think the public anticipates that this is going to be something that any sort of dog can go to. We didn't provide that communication. So I think they're going to be disappointed if we go forward with this and realize that, you know what, this isn't a great spot for larger dogs. And while some dogs don't need to run around, most large dogs do like to have some exercise. So I see that being sort of a disappointment to the community, expecting something different. And I guess, you know, from the financial perspective, I have some difficulties, because we're at a time where expenses are going up a lot. More is being downloaded to us. We have 103 projects on the go. We had a 10% tax increase last year, I think our biggest ever. And so I think we need to start looking at what are the things that we really, really need to do. And for me, a dog park, it's a nice to have, but at a time when we've got a whole pile of other priorities, it's hard for me to justify spending time and money on something that I think could be resolved by putting up some signs and and handing some fines out to people. You know, it's difficult for me to have staff spend time and money on a dog park when we feel like we don't have the time or resources to put an emergency cold weather shelter together. So we're not gonna spend time on emergency cold weather shelter, but we're willing to direct staff to, let's go put up a dog park. And so for me, I find that difficult. Yeah, so for those reasons, I can't support it. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Mr. Edwards, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to respond to a comment from Councillor O'Keefe about the proximity of dog parks to other amenities in parks like playgrounds. And so you're referencing, I think it's the City of Vancouver policy or practice. And but you know, many different cities have different policies and practice. Like the City of Victoria and the District of Saanich, for example, you'll see the bulk of their smaller off-leash dog parks are immediately adjacent to open playgrounds, and they don't have chain link fences around these open dog parks. They're just the low wooden cedar rail fences. And so while I do respect the policy and practice that the City of Vancouver has in place, I just want to acknowledge that it's not necessarily the best practice. And here in our region, it's actually quite a different practice. And you know, the City of Victoria most recently put in a new off-leash dog park on Bay Street in the Fernwood neighborhood that is immediately adjacent to a children's playground and in that same structure, and they have multiple parks like that. So I just wanted to be clear that it isn't the only practice that's out there.
Thank you. I'll speak next, and I'll support this motion, but I do have some concerns, and I may have an amendment to the motion. I'm very much in favor of us having a dog park in Sydney. Others have already spoken to. It started with the public engagement we did in 2018, and since that time, members of the public want a dog park. The reality is that there are different sized dog parks, and the dog park would have been 5 times larger. Actually, when we considered the dog park in Resthaven Park, we actually requested that staff bring back a smaller dog park, and it was the smaller dog park that was 5 times the size of this. The original dog park that was recommended might have been as much as 8 or 9 times the size of this dog park. The reality is that, as we know from staff having gone to other municipalities, whether it's in the capital region, whether it's on the lower mainland, there are different sized dog parks. You're going to have Cy Hampson, and you're going to have pocket parks. And I think it's reasonable, given our space challenges in Sydney, to have a location where there's a pocket park. One of my considerations from not only this staff report, but in the discussions that brought this to this stage this evening, was how this initiated with the challenges of people using the tennis courts inappropriately. We've amended the bylaw. There will be fines. There will be signs. I would hope, I would sincerely hope that if we were to put signage up and there were fines, we speak to the need for enforcement. Our bylaw enforcement is not going to change. We respond to our bylaw officers respond to complaints. So we're not going to be posting a bylaw officer at these courts once the signs are up. So quite frankly, I think with the signs up, we would hopefully see a change in behavior. So the question becomes, is this the best location? And I want to provide a context, and that is, I came onto council for the first time in the fall of 2008, and the previous council had been considering for 3 or 4 years reimagining Iroquois Park. And it was left to our council from 2.9 to 2.11 to actually implement that. And we made substantial changes to the original plan that was brought forward. For example, in the plan that was ready to go forward, the food bank was going to be where this dog park is. And it was through a council motion that it moved the food bank to where it was. The pond was significantly changed. The introduction of the spray park was brought in. The multi-sport court was brought in. A former community building that was used by the food bank right on the corner was removed from the property. And we took up a lot of green space in that park with the parking lot for the boating, for boaters. And I can remember at the time, the concern from residents at the time was we were putting too many things, and there was also a little mini putt that I don't think survived on the other side of the spray park. But the concern was, is that with the crisscrossing of paths, is that there wasn't actually enough open space, that we were actually putting too many things in that park. Now times change, we've become a denser community, and we adapt to these things. But quite frankly, a lot of people associate the soccer field that's adjacent to Iroquois Park as green space, and while it can be used, it's also used for planned recreation activities. We don't put picnic tables out there. We don't, it doesn't have a general use as a park. And when you exclude that area, the open green space is actually fairly limited when you compare it to Resthaven Park, Rathdown Park, Peter Grant Park, other parks that we have. And so I'm willing to consider this at budget deliberations. Cost is going to be a concern for me vis-a-vis what the overall increase is that we're looking at for next year. But I don't recall when we were discussing Resthaven Park that we actually saw an option for a dog park in Iroquois Park. It may have been discussed, or there may have been questions with regards to the potential for a dog park, but it was always going to be apples and oranges given the size of the original park that was planned for Resthaven Park and the size of the pocket park that we're considering in Iroquois Park. And we really haven't considered other parks as a council. We haven't had things come forward to consider other parks. And we have a substantial space between the skateboard park and the volleyball court. It's flat, it's open, and quite frankly, that park is much more well spaced in terms of, you look at the different uses in that park, whether it's the arts center, the picnic area, the playground area, the skateboard park, the volleyball, and that sort of thing. And quite frankly, it is immediately adjacent. I mean, it's literally across the street from it. And so I am going to try this amendment. If we don't have a seconder, then I don't get to speak to it further and we don't consider it. But I would move an amendment that this does come forward as worded to, but staff also bring forward the option for the same dog park south of the skateboard park in Tallista. So it doesn't require any staff cost or time. It could be staff's comments in terms of the appropriateness of the same pocket park being in Tallista.
I'll second that.
Thank you. And I mean, some council members from last term will remember that when we were talking about pickleball, I thought that might be a pickleball location. And quite frankly, I still think it would make a reasonable pickleball location. And I think there may actually be room for a dog park and pickleball, but I'm not going down that road today. We'll do one thing at a time here. But I think residents, appreciate options as well. And while some of the concerns may have seemed unfounded and that sort of thing, we do have to listen to the residents, and there were those who were opposed, and part of that was the compactness of the park and bringing this additional user. So 100% in support of a dog park, fully appreciating that a pocket dog park isn't going to meet the needs of everyone, and yes, will some people be disappointed, but we have limits and options, and I'm willing to consider these options. Other discussion on the amendment, Councillor Duck?
Yeah, I favor seeing two options. I think that's a wise thing to do because I think it will allay some concerns. I think either location is suitable. You're close to playgrounds on both sides. You're close to other activities on both sides. So it just gives an option for space. I think the having multiple functions in the same location, I think, gives families the availability, as one of my colleagues said, to do multiple things in one location, whether that's skateboarding and watching your dog, or playing volleyball and your dog, or across the street in the water park, or anything. So I think it's important to look at both options as possibilities, and that they're approximate and they're responding to the need of that area. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Keith?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not in support of the amendment, just because, go back to 2022, look at the meeting, read the report. Tulista was also not recommended, and we agreed that it was not a good location for similar reasons, multiple uses and things. So, you know, I know that this was a priority in the 2018 Parks Master Plan, and staff did a lot of work in 2022. They came forward with a whole pile of options. They did surveys at different parks, and you know, this, to me, it's kind of reminiscent of pickleball, because we spent a lot of time trying to figure out where that would fit, and in the end we just had to come to the realization that in a small town like Sydney, we can't do everything. So pickleball kind of fell off, and I kind of feel the same about the dog park. It would be great to have a nice dog park, but I just don't think either of those locations are a good fit. I'm also thinking about the fact that, you know, we did a parks needs analysis, I think in the last year or so, and what we found was that we have a shortage of green space and for our growing population. And so that's why we bought property on 3rd Street, because we don't have enough park space. So I have concerns about, you know, comments that, well, this is unutilized space. Well, it might be unutilized now, but when we have a growing population and we're going out and spending significant money to purchase green space, it's hard for me to justify. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor. I'll turn to Councillor Duncan and Councillor Novick. Sorry, I had split vision there.
Yeah, thank you. I'm speaking to the amendment, but clearly the comments apply to this dog park in general. And of course, the staff earlier, when they'd been asked about this, were quick to point out they weren't, not all of the staff who were working on this were here. So I think it is important when we refer back to the decision and the way it was made in 2022 for both staff and public's benefit, we were considering something different. And to say we would not approve this because when we looked at putting in apples, we couldn't do it, so now we can't put in oranges. That's what we're comparing here. We were looking initially at large off-leash dog runs similar to Cy Hampson, and discovered when we evaluated, and staff put a lot of time into it, that there are no parks in Sydney that meet the criteria for that. Rathdown was the largest, but we could not do it because it is adjacent to backyards where there'd be other dogs. And so it was scoped out. Rest Haven is scoped out because it's in a bird sanctuary. That one will not change. Rathdown, however, we may end up putting an orange in there at some later date that is similar to this one. I'm not proposing that now, but I'm saying that in future, if this comes up and council starts getting flack for it, saying you discussed this and ruled it out before. No, we did not. We never discussed a large dog like socialization space, small dog run, and scoped it out. It never came up. We realized we had the need when we discovered that people were able to use tennis courts for this purpose. If people are using a very small space with their dogs, that means we need a very small enclosed space with their dogs. We did not anticipate that, and it was not something that came up. Council and staff and towns in general need to have the flexibility to adjust their plans as needs become apparent. And Rathdown is the next park to come up for quite a lot more capital, having washrooms, new sport courts there. It's entirely possible that a similar small dog run could go in a park like that, or in Beaver Park. And these may be reevaluated with fenced areas where they are separated from backyards. And I think at that time, council staff and the public need to be prepared to evaluate that on an orange-to-orange basis and leave out why it was scoped out for the large dog run. We just don't have the space here, but we might have that. We may not have it need it at Rat Down because there are still a lot of backyards, but I think it's something that could be on our radar. And so as I look at this, and this amendment of saying, look, if we never looked at Tulista as having a small dog fenced area either. We looked at that as a potential for a larger area, and it was scoped out because that large field has too many conflicting users. But a smaller area with a smaller subsection, much as Iroquois Park, that might be worth staff explaining why one is better than the other for that particular use, and so I'm in support of this amendment.
Thank you, Councillor. Sorry, do we have any other first-time speakers? Councillor Novak?
Thank you, Mayor. I support the amendment. I think Tulista Park is a wonderful alternative, and at the very least, I think it's worth the effort for staff to have a serious look at that space in addition to the one at Iroquois Park. I'm just looking at the space right now, and I would suggest that the space in Iroquois Park that could be used for a similar, let's call it a pocket dog park, could be 2 to 3 times the size of the space allocated in Iroquois Park and still leave quite a bit of green space available for other uses. I think it's an excellent alternative, and I think people would appreciate it because there's an awful lot of people that take their dogs on waterfront walks, an awful lot. I do. And this would simply be a stopover for them and give them an opportunity to be off leash for 10, 15 minutes, even half an hour before continuing on their walk. I don't think it disturbs anything else. It's not just going to disturb the kids at the skate park. The volleyball court, for as often as it's used, I don't think it's going to be impacted by the presence of another resource or park resource, let's call it that. And I agree that the space at Iroquois Park is very small, and we kind of chose it because the problem was at the Iroquois basketball court or tennis courts, and this seemed to be the easiest and closest fix. But if we can consider Iroquois Park, I think that would be a much better alternative. It would be better for the larger dogs, better for the smaller dogs. Each would have more of their own space in which to socialize. And I think the owners would appreciate it. There's shade trees not far away from there, not a lot at that spot in Iroquois Park. I think on a number of counts, the space at Iroquois beats the one, sorry, the space at Tulista beats the one at Iroquois. So I'd definitely like to see that in the mix at budget time when it comes time to make a decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no other first-time speakers, I'll turn to Councillor O'Keefe for a second time, please.
Thank you. Just getting back to the sort of apples and oranges, whether, what we were doing in 2022 is different than now. Yeah, it's different. I guess, one of the concerns I have is that we haven't, if we had communicated this to the public, that this is designed to be a small pocket dog park suitable for this type of dogs, I would feel more comfortable, but we didn't do that. I know that we gave them a map, but people, it's hard to tell like dimensions and things like that. And so a lot of the feedback we got was they want to make sure there's enough room for large dogs. So just clarifying that. In regards to comments about if a tennis court is good enough now.
Point of order.
I'll listen to your point of order, Councillor.
Are we debating one another's points back and forth, or are we speaking to the motion that's on the floor? It's unclear to me.
So, thank you.
Okay.
I'll take your point of order, Councillor, and Councillor O'Keefe. The amendment is to include Tulista Park as a second option when it comes forward to budget. You've spoken in opposition to it. Do you have further remarks to make?
I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Not seeing any further discussion, I'll call the question on the amendment, please. Those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Keefe is opposed. The motion carries. And any further discussion on the amended motion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Those in favor? Opposed? Councillor Keefe is opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. So we're next turning to item 13B, which is the SHOAL Center Common Facilities Maintenance and Repair Agreement. I'll turn to Mr. Hissick, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. We're seeking approval for an amended maintenance and repair agreement with the strata at the SHOAL Center for maintenance of the common facilities. This agreement is reviewed every 5 years, and a slightly amended 5-year renewal is proposed. The town is responsible for 19.5% of the common area costs for the center, primarily due to the inclusion of our senior center. And this cost came to about $58,000 in the current year.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we have a recommendation, please. Councillor Novick.
Thank you. I'm prepared to move the recommendation that the amended Shoal Center Common Facilities Maintenance and Repair Agreement for a 5-year term from January 1st, 2026 to December 31st, 2030 be approved.
Second.
We have a second by Councillor Garnett. Any discussion?
I think Mr. Hissick has given us all the information necessary. I think the Shoal is a wonderful resource for the community, and I think it makes sense that we continue to support it. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Seeing none, those in favor? That carries unanimous. Thank you. We've dealt with 13C through the presentation, so we're coming to 13D, the Budget Variance Report for third quarter of 2025. Back to you, Mr. Hissick, please.
Thank you again, Mr. Mayor. Ms. Chen is unfortunately unwell today, so you're left with just me, but she did the bulk of the work on this. The variance report covers roughly the first 3 quarters of the current year, and year-to-date operating results are presented up to the date of the report rather than just the 9-month mark, which might appear to put several functions over the 75% mark. The budget for personnel costs, for example, is closer to 80% for the year-to-date. And on the operating side, overall, we're doing reasonably well for the year. As mentioned in the semi-annual report, we won't have the usual savings on the RCMP contract due to an adjustment we received for last fiscal year. 58 of the 103 capital projects are either completed or in progress, and planning is underway for some of the projects that have not yet seen any costs. We expect to complete several more projects over the remainder of this year. However, as usual, some projects will be carried forward to next year. We've included 52 detailed notes on various operating and capital items, and some cover more than one item. We'd be pleased to address any questions that might remain. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hissick. Any questions? Councillor Garnett, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to staff. Just looking at item B3, fire vehicle replacement plan, and I know we moved forward the purchase for the fire chief's vehicle. And basically, I know he's not here to answer to it, but as I recall, when he was here and discussed the item, it was essentially was on its last rights. So I'm just curious if is the vehicle still operating safely, or if not, does he have access to another vehicle in terms of performing his duties until the new vehicle arrives in the spring?
Thank you, Councillor. Currently, it is hanging in there, and we hope it will remain so until the delayed delivery of the new vehicle. If it doesn't, we will find a way. He will definitely have access to the vehicle he needs.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Keefe, please.
Thanks. I was just wondering about a question through you to staff on item B8, the John Place improvements, the drain replacement and sewer realignment pathway. Can staff remind me, that's related to the 2180 development. Does the developer pay a portion of those costs as well?
Just turning to staff for a moment.
It's B8.
Under the B8.
Through the mayor to the councillor, there are conditions of zoning from the zoning amendment for that development at 2180 Beacon West. So we would have to refer to the zoning bylaw to see what is required there. The developer they're looping a water main through the property to connect the water main from Beacon Avenue West up to Jan Place. I think they were doing some drainage improvements on the pathway. I would have to refer to the zoning bylaw for those conditions of zoning which are required that they had to do before a building permit is issued for that project. Thank you.
Okay, so these things here, is sort of things that we would have, that we're gonna have to do, and they're doing sounds like some other infrastructure things. If I understand. Okay,
Yes, we would not budget for anything that the developer was responsible for, but we sometimes take the opportunity to do some additional adjacent work that makes sense to do at the same time.
okay, yep, thank you, that's all.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no further questions, I want to thank Mr. Hisik, and please pass on our thanks to Ms. Chen for all the work. I think this is hugely transparent in terms of these reports on a quarterly basis, and we appreciate them. We're next turning to correspondence, and we did raise item 15.9. Councillor Duncan, you raised the item?
Yeah, thank you. Briefly, just having seen this letter and seeing that they had requested that our council support this, and knowing that we had SIP here just last week with Aaron Stone presenting on blue economy and coast and the Indigenous partnerships. I had reached out to him saying this seems like something SIP would be doing, and of course we already support SIP, so I wanted to know if they'd had any feedback into this when the province was doing its engagement from SIP's members or SIP itself, or whether they had seen this work being done and had a chance to incorporate it into their plans and their 5-year cycle, and the answer was yes to both. He's traveling, but he said that in 2026, when they have their detailed plans come out, they will actually be mentioning how this aligns specifically with the BC Coastal Marine Strategy, both things that have already been implemented by members and things that they are planning going forward, as provincial funding goes towards these things. And so when we see those more detailed plans, we will see how they specifically align with this provincial stuff. So it was good to know that we're already supporting this, and that those kind of two things were actually working in concert rather than passing each other in the night. And I wanted to bring that forward for public and council to hear that.
Thanks, Councillor Duncan. Thanks for reaching out to the SIP CAO after his presentation. So we have 9 remaining items under, we don't require a motion to receive that. Sorry, I'm looking over to Ms. Nelson. We don't require a motion. And so we do have 9 remaining items under correspondence for information. Those are being received by virtue of being on the agenda. We have no notice of motion. I'll turn and kindly thank Councillor Garnett to read once again our motion to go in camera.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll move as in the opinion of council that the public interest requires that persons other than members of the council and officers be excluded from the meeting to consider confidential matters regarding personal information about an identifiable individual who holds or is being considered for an appointment pursuant to section 90.1A of the Community Charter, and that council continue the meeting in closed session.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor? Thank you. We won't adjourn. We'll recess for just a few minutes to allow staff. Thank you very much, staff.